Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am genuinely glad you are here today because we are about to walk into what can only be described as a cultural minefield.
That's a good way to put it.
But for a lot of us, and maybe for you listening right now, it's not just a minefield we're observing from a distance. It's the neighborhood we grew up in.
That is a perfect, if slightly terrifying way to describe it. It's a landscape that shaped how millions of people view their own bodies, their relationships, and, even their spiritual standing with God.
Exactly. If you were a teenager in the 90s or the early 2000s, specifically within that, that evangelical Christian bubble, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
You remember the silver rings. You remember the pledge cards signed with very serious shaking hands. You probably remember a youth pastor holding up a rose, plucking the petals off one by one, and telling you, this is what happens to your heart when you date around.
The damaged goods analogy,
Yeah.
it is. It's iconic imagery. And honestly, for a lot of people, it was foundational to their trauma. It taught a whole generation that their value was depreciating with every single interaction.
A human stock market that only ever goes down.
Pretty much.
So today we are talking about the massive pendulum swing regarding romance, sex, and singleness over the last 30 years. We are looking at the rise and fall of what we now call purity culture. But we aren't just doing a post-mortem. We're also looking at what is rising from the ashes.
Right, because it's not enough to just say, that was bad. We have to ask, so what now? We're tracking a shift from a fear-based control model, essentially don't cross the line or you're ruined, to a modern perspective that tries to integrate boundaries, mental health, and a much deeper, more robust theology of the body.
We have a really fascinating stack of sources today. We're going to cover the retraction of perhaps the most famous book on dating ever written in that world. We have clinical data on the mental health fallout of that era. But we aren't just staying in the past, digging up old bones.
No, and that is the key. We have to move forward. So we are also looking at sources on the theology of the body, practical modern advice on things like dating apps. Yes, we are going there. And a completely different way to look at singleness.
The mission today is to figure out, how do we move from that fear-based model to one based on personhood, community, and freedom? So let's start where the trouble or the movement really began. The year is 1997.
And the book is I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Joshua Harris.
If you didn't grow up in this world, it is so hard to explain just how massive this book was. It wasn't just a bestseller, it was a constitution. It was the operating system for an entire generation of Christian youth groups.
It sold over 1 million copies, which for a Christian book by a first-time author who was, 21 years old? It's astronomical.
21, that's a key detail.
It's a huge detail. And you have to understand the context. This was the late 90s. The divorce rate in the secular world was skyrocketing. Parents in the church were terrified. They looked at the culture around them and said, whatever they're doing, it's not working. We need a different way. And Joshua Harris provided a radical solution.
So the core argument was that the modern dating system was fundamentally broken. He wasn't just saying we should date better. He was saying the entire system is corrupt.
Exactly. He argued that dating was essentially practice for divorce. Think about that phrase.
It's sticky.
It's very sticky. The logic was you date someone, you give them a piece of your heart, you break up, you get your heart broken, then you do it again and again. You're practicing breaking up. You're practicing short-term conditional commitment. Why, he asked, would you practice the very thing you want to avoid in marriage?
And by the time you get to the altar, you're killed. You're just a collection of scars and broken pieces. You're damaged goods.
Right. The logic was, why would you practice giving pieces of yourself away? Why engage in a system designed to fail 99% of the time? Because unless you marry the person, the relationship technically failed.
And to really drive this home, he used a storytelling technique right at the start of the book that was incredibly powerful. It's a parable, really. It's a wedding.
The wedding scene, yes, this is the parable that haunted 1 million nightmares. I am not exaggerating.
So, picture this. There's a groom. His name is David. He is standing at the altar. It's his big day. He's about to marry his bride, Anna. It's supposed to be this perfect holy moment. The officiant gets to the part, does anyone object? Or implies that moment of silence. And suddenly, a woman stands up in the pews.
And this is where it just turns into a horror movie for a young reader.
It really does. She walks down the aisle, completely uninvited. She walks right up to the groom, takes David's hand, and says to the bride, Anna, I have a piece of his heart.
And then it gets worse.
Then another woman stands up, and another, and another.
It's a parade of his past.
It's brutal. You have this line of ex-girlfriends standing there, and they're all holding these invisible chunks of this guy's soul. And David has to turn to his bride, Anna, on their wedding day and say, "I'm sorry, I don't have a whole heart to give you."
Now, think about the psychological weight of that image for a 14-year-old reading it in their bedroom at night.
It's devastating.
It solidified a very specific, terrifying logic. Every relationship you enter that doesn't end in marriage is a theft. You are stealing emotional intimacy from your future spouse. You are wronging a person you haven't even met yet.
Which raises the stakes to an impossible level. It's not just, I hope this works out.
Yeah.
If this doesn't work out, I am permanently damaging myself and sinning against my future.
Right. If a coffee date creates a soul tie that fractures your heart forever, you are going to be paralyzed. You can't move. You can't take any risks.
Exactly. And that paralysis was solved by Eris's proposal. Courtship. The book wasn't just a critique of the problem. It offered a very clear manual for the solution.
It was a full system replacement. He said, stop dating entirely.
So what did courtship look like, practically? What were the rules of engagement?
Well, it was very structured. The idea was friendship first, but a very specific kind of friendship. Strictly platonic, no romantic pressure, no flirting.
So no ambiguity.
Zero ambiguity was the goal, and heavy parental oversight. In many circles, this meant the young man had to approach the young woman's father first before he even spoke to her about his intentions.
So it's a transfer of authority. The father is the gatekeeper of his daughter's heart.
That was exactly the language used. And then, if the father approved, the couple would spend time together, but usually in groups or with family around. It was all about accountability.
And physically, what were the boundaries there?
The boundaries were strict. No kissing until the wedding day was the gold standard. That was the big prize you were waiting for. Holding hands was often discouraged until engagement. The whole goal was to keep the physical completely out of the equation so that the spiritual and emotional connection could thrive without being corrupted by physical desire.
The rule that always stuck out to me in the text was this: do not begin a relationship unless you can picture marriage in the immediate future.
Yes, and on paper, that sounds so efficient, right? Why waste time on someone you're not going to marry?
It sounds wise, even.
It sounds wise, but think about the pressure that puts on a teenager or a young adult. It forces you to make a lifelong assessment about a person before you've even had a real, honest, vulnerable conversation with them.
You haven't seen them angry yet. You haven't seen how they treat a waiter.
You know nothing about their flaws. It removes the getting to know you phase, which is messy and experimental, and it jumps straight to, are we compatible for the next 50 years?
It's basically saying, don't test drive the car unless you have the check written out for the full amount.
That is a perfect analogy, and it led to a lot of people getting married incredibly young, sometimes to the very first person they held hands with, because the pressure to legitimize the relationship and move it toward the finish line marriage was so high.
So that was 1997. That was the air we breathed. It was the water we swam in. Now fast forward 20 years. We have an interview in our stack from Premier Christianity with Joshua Harris himself. And this is, well, it's shocking. He isn't just tweaking his views. He isn't just releasing a revised and updated edition.
No, this is a full-blown retraction, a recall.
He is pulling the book from the shelves.
He actually discontinued the publication. You cannot buy a new copy of I Kissed Dating Goodbye from the publisher because the author himself realized it was harmful. That is almost unheard of in the publishing world, especially for a book that successful.
Why did he do it? What changed for him in those 2 decades?
I think the simple answer is perspective, wisdom, pain. You have to remember what we said before. He admits this in the interview. He was 21 years old when he wrote that book. He was barely an adult himself.
He was a kid writing a manual for millions of other kids and their parents.
Precisely. And he came from a very specific cultural bubble. A homeschooling background, a tight-knit church community. He was writing from his very limited, very specific experience. In the interview, looking back, he admits that the book was driven fundamentally by fear.
Fear of what? Fear of messing up?
Fear of messing up, fear of sin, fear of pain. The mentality was, if the line of sin is over there, let's build a fence 10 miles back just to be safe.
This is a classic theological concept, the hedge around the law. The Pharisees did this. If the law says don't work on the Sabbath, let's define work so strictly that you can't even, tie your shoe.
That's a great comparison. It's a system of risk management.
Mhm.
If you don't date, you can't have premarital sex. If you don't kiss, you can't be tempted to go further. But what Harris realized later is that this fear-based system completely displaced grace. It left no room for mistakes, for learning, for forgiveness.
He used a very strong word in the interview that we have to talk about. He said his book was weaponized.
Weaponized.
Huh.
That's not a word you use lightly. It implies that people were hurt.
It implies damage, not just disagreement.
It does, and he talks about how parents and church leaders took his suggestions, which he claims he meant as, hey, this worked for me, maybe try it, and turned them into commandments. It became a new law. It became, if you date, you are sinning against God and your future spouse.
So his nuance was lost.
He admits his writing lacked nuance. He was writing in black and white because that's how he saw the world at 21. He didn't account for the fact that people are different, contexts are different, or that people actually need to learn relationship skills through trial and error. You can't learn to ride a bike just by reading a book about it. You have to fall a few times.
You have to skin your knees.
You have to. And his system tried to prevent any skinned knees, but in doing so, it prevented a lot of people from ever learning to ride at all.
There's a really poignant part of that interview where he talks about his own personal journey. He uses this phrase, youthful momentum. I think that's a concept we need to unpack because it applies to so much more than just this one book.
It's a profound insight for anyone in leadership or anyone who follows influencers on social media today. Harris became a massive authority figure, a lead pastor of a megachurch. Before he had really lived much life or had formal theological education, he got the platform before he had the seasoning.
Right.
And he says he often mistook his own energy, his own charisma, and his statistical success, the book sales, the church growth, for the Holy Spirit working.
That is a terrifying distinction to miss. Confusing your own hype with God's voice.
It's so easy to do. It happens more than we think. We see a crowded room, we see book sales, we see Instagram followers, and we think God must be blessing this. But Harris eventually realized that a lot of what he interpreted as divine guidance was just his own personality and his specific cultural context pushing him forward. He was living life backwards, as he put it.
What did he mean by that?
He meant he did the ministry before he did the theology. He got the big church before he went to seminary. He wrote the book on marriage before he had been married for very long. He eventually suffered a massive burnout, stepped down from ministry, and later his own marriage ended.
It's a tragedy, really.
Yeah.
But it also seems to be a moment of intense, painful clarity for him.
It is. And it serves as a powerful cautionary tale about elevating young voices too quickly. Wisdom takes time. You can't microwave character, and you can't microwave good theology.
So you have the architect of the movement apologizing. He has, in effect, left the building, but the building is still standing, and a lot of people are still trapped in the rubble. That brings us to the aftermath section of our deep dive. We have a source here from Through the Valley Therapy that deals with the clinical reality of purity culture.
This is where we shift from the theological theory to the medical and psychological reality. This is what happens when these ideas meet real human bodies and minds.
The therapist in this source describes a significant wave of clients, now in their late 20s and 30s, who are dealing with sexual dysfunction, anxiety, and deep-seated shame.
And these are the kids who follow the rules. These are the good kids.
Right. These are the success stories of the movement who are now showing up in therapy offices completely broken.
Broken, confused, and angry. Because the promise of purity culture was the exact opposite of this outcome.
What was the promise? What was the deal on the table?
The transaction was, give God your teen years, suppress your desires, abstain now, be pure, follow our rules, and in return, he will give you a mind-blowing, fireworks-level sex life in marriage.
Wait, and it will be magical.
That was the deal. But the brain doesn't work like a light switch. You cannot spend 2 decades telling your brain sex is dangerous, sex is dirty, sex will ruin you, sex is a threat, and then sign a marriage license and expect the amygdala, the fear center of your brain, to suddenly say, just kidding, it's all good now. Sex is safe and holy and fun.
The body keeps the score.
Yeah.
You can't just talk yourself out of years of conditioning.
You absolutely cannot. The source mentions specific clinical conditions they're seeing. One of them is vaginismus.
Can you explain what that is for the listeners? It's a term a lot of people may not have heard.
Vaginismus is an involuntary spasming of the pelvic floor muscles that makes sexual penetration painful, or in some cases, completely impossible. It's a physical reaction, but it is very often linked to deep-seated psychological fear or past trauma. The body is literally saying no, even if the mind wants to say yes.
That is heartbreaking.
Yes.
You follow all the rules, you wait for your wedding night, you're excited, and then your own body shuts down because of the very fear you were taught by the church.
It's a profound betrayal. And on the flip side of that, the source talks about shame-based addictions, things like secret pornography use.
How does that connect? It seems counterintuitive.
Well, because the pressure to be pure was so impossibly high, any natural curiosity or sexual desire became a source of massive guilt. You felt like a monster for having normal human feelings. That guilt fuels a cycle of shame, and shame often leads to hiding. So you hide your desires, you act out in secret, you feel more shame, and the cycle just deepens.
That drives it all underground.
Exactly. It creates a secret life.
Yeah.
And this all leads to what the source calls the evangelical movement.
Right. People who are. They're not just changing churches, they're leaving the faith entirely.
For some, the trauma is so inextricably linked to the church environment, to their concept of God, that in order to heal, they feel they have to leave the whole system behind. They can't separate God from the shame they were taught in his name.
But the therapist in our source makes a really helpful distinction here that I want to focus on. They talk about the difference between deconstructing and disentangling.
I love this distinction. It's so useful.
Deconstruction is a buzzword right now, but it can feel, well, destructive. It sounds like demolition. What is disentangling?
Deconstruction often implies tearing the whole house down to the foundation, or maybe even blowing up the foundation itself. Disentangling is more like sorting through a really messy junk drawer.
The junk drawer we all have in the kitchen with the dead batteries and the soy sauce packets.
That's the one. You dump the whole thing out on the counter, you look at every single item, and you start sorting. You're separating the God part from the cultural junk part.
Okay, so you ask questions like,
You ask, is sex actually bad, or was I just taught to be afraid of it? Is my personal worth actually tied to my virginity, or is that a lie I was sold by this specific subculture? Is obedience more important than critical thinking? You keep the truth, the things that are actually good and biblical, and you throw away the cultural baggage.
it's replacing that blind obedience with discernment. It's learning to think for yourself again.
That's the key shift. Purity culture valued obedience over critical thinking. Do what you're told, don't ask questions. Recovery involves learning to trust your own conscience, your own mind, and the Holy Spirit's guidance within you again.
There's a huge irony here that we have to touch on before we move to singleness. The entire movement was designed to create strong, healthy, lifelong marriages. That was the stated goal. But the source argues it actually left people ill-equipped for real marriage because they never learned crucial relationship skills.
Specifically, they never learned boundaries.
How so? It seems like it was all about boundary.
But it was only one boundary. It was a giant wall that said, don't touch. It was an avoidance strategy. But a real relationship isn't about avoidance, it's about negotiation. If your only tool is a wall, you don't learn the subtle art of saying, I'm not comfortable with that, or I need this from you, or let's talk about our expectations.
Yeah.
You don't learn how to understand consent in a nuanced way.
You just learn a single, blunt no to everything.
Right. You just learn avoidance. And avoidance is not a relationship skill, it's a survival mechanism. And it doesn't work inside a marriage.
That's a perfect transition. Because if you aren't dating, or if you're waiting for the one to drop out of the sky so you can start this perfect marriage, you are, by definition, single. And in the 90s era, singleness was treated like a waiting room.
The waiting room is the perfect metaphor. You're just sitting there, reading old magazines, listening to bad music, waiting for the doctor to call your name so your real life can finally begin.
It's a state of suspension, of not yetness.
A problem to be solved.
But our sources today, specifically from Lifeway Research and the Evangelical Covenant Church, are trying to burn that waiting room to the ground. They identify several lies the church has told about singleness. I want to run through these because I think they will resonate with a lot of people listening.
Let's do it. This is so important.
Lie number 1, singleness is bad, or at the very least, it's less than. It's the kids' table at Thanksgiving. It's a B-grade life.
The cultural narrative, both inside and outside the church, is that marriage is the capstone of adulthood. It's the thing that makes you a complete person. If you aren't married, you're incomplete. You're a half person walking around looking for your other half.
The Jerry Maguire line, you complete me.
Exactly. But the source points to the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 7. It's a famous text, but it is often conveniently ignored in very family-centric churches. Paul actually suggests singleness is preferable for ministry.
Not just acceptable, preferable.
Preferable. He says marriage brings worldly troubles, which is funny because usually the church pitches marriage as the cure for all your troubles. Get married and you'll settle down and be happy.
Paul is a realist. He knows marriage splits your focus. You have to care for your spouse, your kids, your mortgage, your in-laws. It's a lot of work. Singleness, he argues, allows for undivided devotion to the Lord. It's not a consolation prize for people who couldn't get a date. It's a strategic advantage for the kingdom of God. Okay, that's a huge reframe. Let's go to line number 2, the gift of singleness. I've read this my whole life. Usually someone says, oh, I couldn't possibly stay single. I don't have the gift of singleness.
Which is almost always code for, I have a sex drive.
Pretty much.
It's code for, I am a human being with normal desires, so therefore I must be called to marriage.
Right. People have come to believe the gift is some kind of superpower that zaps you and removes your libido or your desire for companionship.
Yeah.
But the source argues that's a complete misreading. Singleness is the gift. It's not a special talent you have. It's the state of being you are in.
So if I'm single today, then for today, I have the gift of singleness.
Exactly. It might not be for tomorrow or next year, but for right now, that is your reality. The question isn't, do I have the gift? The question is, how am I stewarding the gift I have right now? It's about accepting your current reality as a valid and good place to be, not about waiting for a mystical feeling of contentment to descend on you. Okay, line number 3, no intimacy. The idea that if I'm single, I'm destined to be lonely, that true, deep intimacy is reserved for married people.
This one hits deep. Because our entire world tells us the only cure for loneliness is romantic, sexual love.
Every movie, every song.
It all points to one solution. And that comes from conflating sex with intimacy. Our modern culture, both secular and, sadly, often Christian, says you cannot be truly intimate with someone unless you are sleeping with them. But the Bible disagrees vehemently.
Give us the counterpoint from the text.
Look at Jesus. He was single. He was a 33-year-old single man. Was he lonely? I'm sure he was at times, like in the Garden of Gethsemane. But did he lack intimacy? Absolutely not. He had profound, deep love and connection with his disciples. He had a rich friendship with Mary and Martha and Lazarus.
He wasn't emotionally distant.
Not at all. He was physically affectionate. He washed feet. He embraced people. He was emotionally vulnerable. He wept at his friend's tomb. The Bible gives us this incredible model of non-sexual intimacy that is rich and life-giving and deep.
Which connects directly to line number 4. No family. The idea that without a spouse and kids of your own, you are essentially an orphan in the world.
This is where the theology gets really interesting and I think really beautiful. The Evangelical Covenant Church source talks about how Jesus fundamentally redefined the concept of family. In the Old Testament, blood was everything. Your genealogy was your survival, your economic safety net, your legacy.
That's why being barren was considered such a devastating curse in the Old Testament. It wasn't just sad, it was an economic and social disaster.
Exactly. Your line ended. You were erased from history. But in the New Testament, Jesus completely flips the table. Someone comes to him and says, your mother and brothers are outside. And he looks at the crowd and says, who are my mother and brothers? Those who do the will of God.
A radical statement.
It's world-changing. The argument here is that the waters of baptism are thicker than the waters of the womb. The church is supposed to be the primary family for the single person.
So, if single people feel lonely in church or feel like they don't belong because all the sermons are about marriage and parenting, it's not because singleness is broken. It's because the church isn't functioning as the family it's called to be.
Bingo. We have relegated family to the nuclear unit. Mom, dad, 2 kids, and a dog. And we've forgotten that we are all supposed to be mothers and brothers and sisters to each other.
There's a big theological word used in this section that I want us to break down because it sounds intimidating, but the concept is beautiful. Eschatological.
Yes. Eschatological hope. It sounds like something from a seminary textbook, but it's actually very practical.
Translate that for us regular folks.
Eschatological just relates to the eschaton, which is a fancy word for the end times, or the eternal state of things, the ultimate reality. And the argument is this. Marriage is a temporary institution. It belongs to this age, this earth.
It has an expiration date.
It does. Jesus says very clearly in the Gospels that in the resurrection we neither marry nor are given in marriage. He says we will be like the angels.
So wait, in heaven, I'm not going to be married to my wife. That's a weird thought.
And it is a weird thought for us. The idea is that the exclusive one-flesh union of marriage is a picture, a shadow, that is ultimately dissolved into a much greater universal union with God and the entire body of Christ. So, here's the kicker. The single person in their state of singleness is actually a signpost of the eternal state.
What do you mean?
They are living now the reality that we will all live then.
Wow. That flips the script entirely. Usually, we look at married people as the mature ones who have arrived. This theology suggests that single people are the ones who are actually demonstrating our future reality to the rest of us.
It gives singleness a tremendous dignity. It's not a lack, it's a prophetic witness. And because of that, the source argues singleness has specific virtues it can cultivate. One is hospitality, or the idea of the open table. Because a single person isn't as naturally insular, protecting a nuclear family unit, they often have the time and emotional capacity to be the hub of community.
Their front door can be a revolving door for people.
Exactly. And the other virtue is interdependence.
This one is huge.
It's crucial. In a marriage, it's really easy to become self-sufficient. It's us against the world. We don't need anyone else. We have each other. A single person has to reach out. That they have to ask for help when they move apartments, when they need a ride to the airport, or when they're sick. And that act of asking actually knits the church together. It reminds us that we need each other.
There's a quote in the notes I love. If you're free while you're single, you're not doing it right.
It's so provocative, isn't it? The world says singleness is for you. Travel the world, spend your money on yourself, focus on your career, swipe left and right. The Christian view of singleness is, give this incredible gift of freedom, yes. Now invest it. Use that extra time, that extra money, that extra emotional capacity to serve, to mentor, to build deep friendships. Singleness shouldn't be selfish. It should be radically communal.
Okay, so we've deconstructed the trauma of the past, we've elevated the theological view of singleness, but let's be real. A lot of people listening still want to get married, people still fall in love, and that involves dating. So section 4 of our deep dive asks the practical question. If we aren't doing I kiss dating goodbye, and we aren't doing the secular hookup culture, how in the world do we date without losing our minds?
And for that, we turn to the classics. Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend and their book, Boundaries in Dating.
This book is legendary for a reason, and their premise right out of the gate is blunt. No kids allowed.
It's true. They argue that dating is an adult activity. It requires maturity because it is inherently risky. You are opening your heart to someone who might reject you. If you approach that like a child needing constant validation, being unable to handle the word no, throwing a tantrum when things don't go your way, you are going to get hurt, and you're going to hurt someone else.
They have this equation that sums up their whole philosophy. Freedom plus responsibility. Love. Let's unpack freedom first.
Freedom, in their view, means you are making a conscious choice. You aren't dating someone because you're afraid of being alone. That's compulsion, not freedom. You aren't dating because your mom is nagging you. That's guilt. You are dating because you freely choose to get to know this person.
And you are also free to leave.
That's the other side of it. If you aren't free to leave, you aren't free to love. Love requires the option to say no. If you feel trapped, it's not love, it's a hostage situation.
Okay, so that's freedom. What about responsibility?
Responsibility is doing the work to keep the relationship healthy. It's communicating clearly and honestly. It's setting limits and respecting the other person's limits. It's owning your own emotions instead of blaming them on the other person. It's the adulting part of the equation.
This brings us to the core concept of the whole book. Boundaries. They describe a boundary as a property line for the soul.
I love this visual. Imagine your life is a house with a yard. A fence defines what is inside your yard and what is outside. A boundary does the same thing for your soul. It defines what is me and what is not me.
You mean example?
My feelings, my attitudes, my choices, my values, those are inside my yard. I am responsible for them. Your feelings, your bad mood, your expectations of me, those are in your yard. You are responsible for them.
So if I say no to a second date and you get angry,
your anger is in your yard. I don't have to bring it into my house and fix it for you. I can empathize with it. I can say, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I don't have to own it. That is the key to healthy dating. If you can't say no, you don't have a boundary. And if you can't hear no, you don't respect boundaries.
They list some specific types of boundaries. Words is one of the first. Just the simple ability to use language to define reality.
It sounds so simple, but it's not. It's being able to say, I don't like that. I am not comfortable with this. I need to go home now. If you can't say those words clearly and kindly, you are at the mercy of the other person's agenda.
Another one is truth. Being honest about who you are and what you want.
Yes. If you're pretending to love hiking because he loves hiking, or you're pretending to be more spiritual than you are because she's very spiritual, you're lying. You're building a relationship on a fake foundation, and it will eventually collapse.
They also talk about distance as a boundary, taking time or space.
Right. If a relationship is moving too fast, or if you feel confused, a healthy person can say, I need to take a step back for a week and think. An unhealthy person will see that as rejection and panic.
This all reframes the whole purpose of dating. They call it an incubator.
Yes, this is such a healthy way to look at it. We usually think the purpose of dating is find a mate. It's a treasure hunt. They say, no, the primary purpose of dating is character growth.
How so?
Dating is like a mirror held up to your soul. It reveals all your stuff. It shows you where you are insecure, where you are selfish, where you are defensive, where you communicate poorly. So even a relationship that fails, meaning it doesn't end in marriage, is a huge success if you learn something about your own character in the process.
That takes so much pressure off. You aren't failing. You're learning.
You're in a lab for your own soul.
Okay, so that's the principle. But some people want a more practical framework, a rule, which brings us to a very specific modern idea in our stack from Pastor Mike Todd. He calls it the 90-day rule.
Right. This is for people who hear boundaries and think it's too vague. They want a hard number. They want a guardrail. And the concept is simple. For the first 90 days of a relationship, you wait. No physical intimacy. And you keep the heavy romantic pressure off the table.
Why 90 days? Is there, like, a science to that number?
It's more pragmatic than scientific. He says it's less than a football season. It's a memorable chunk of time. But the logic behind it is sound. He says it's long enough for the representative to leave the building.
A representative, what's that?
You know, when you first meet someone, you don't send your real self on the date. You send your representative the best, funniest, most polite, best-dressed version of yourself, your avatar.
The first date version of me who loves listening to every story and never gets cranky in traffic.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But after 3 months of consistent time together, the avatar gets tired, the real person starts to show up. You see them when they're stressed about work, when they're stuck in traffic, when the waiter messes up their order. The goal of the 90 days is to build a solid friendship foundation before the drug of physical chemistry takes over and clouds your judgment.
It's about quieting the noise so you can hear the signal.
Perfectly put. If you get physical too fast, the oxytocin floods your brain. It's the cuddle hormone. It bonds you chemically to the person. That chemical bond can blind you to major red flags. You might stay with a person who isn't good for you simply because the chemistry is loud. The 90-day rule is like a detox period to ensure you actually like the person, not just the dopamine hit they give you.
Now, we can't talk modern dating without talking about the apps. Online dating. There's still this lingering stigma in a lot of Christian circles. If I use an app, I'm taking matters into my own hands. I'm not trusting God to bring me someone.
Felicia Masonheimer addresses this head-on in our source stack, and she is having none of that argument. She tackles the question, is online dating a lack of faith? And her answer is a resounding no. Her point is faith and action are not opposites. They work together.
She uses the Abraham example from the Old Testament, which I think is just brilliant.
It is. It's the perfect illustration. In the book of Genesis, Abraham needs to find a wife for his son, Isaac. He wants a believing wife, someone from his own people. He doesn't just sit in his tent and pray for a woman to fall from the sky.
Lord, drop her right here.
No, he calls his most trusted servant. He gives him resources, 10 camels, all kinds of goods. He gives him clear instructions, and he sends him on a long journey to actively find a wife. He used the technology and network of his day. He took initiative.
So using an app is just a modern version of sending a servant to the next town over. It's a tool.
Exactly. It's a tool. It's a mechanism. God can guide the servant on his journey, and God can guide your swipe on an app.
But what about the weirdo defense? You hear this all the time. Oh, there's so many weirdos and creeps online.
Her response to that is great. There are weirdos at the grocery store, too. The internet doesn't create weirdos. It just concentrates them and makes them easier to find. You have to use discernment everywhere you go. Meeting someone at church doesn't guarantee they are safe or healthy, and meeting someone on an app doesn't mean they are bad. God is big enough to use an algorithm.
I love that line. God can use an algorithm.
So we're shifting gears a little bit. We've talked about the mechanics of dating, but there's another huge piece of the purity culture puzzle that was focused on the body itself, and that's the idea of modesty.
Oh boy, modesty. The battleground of tank top strap widths and skirt lengths measured with a ruler.
Don't be a stumbling block. That was the mantra that was drilled into a generation of young women. And it was entirely behavior modification. It was about inches of fabric. And the underlying message, especially to women, was men are visual creatures, like animals who can't control themselves. So it is your job to manage their lust. If a man sins by looking at you, it's at least partly your fault because you showed too much shoulder.
Which is, first, insulting to men, implying they're just beasts with no self-control, and second, an incredible burden to place on women.
It's an impossible burden. It creates a dynamic where the woman is responsible for the man's spiritual state. Our source from Modern Reformation by Chase Krug argues that this old definition was shallow and, frankly, unbiblical. He proposes a new philosophy based on the theology of the body, which was popularized by Pope John Paul II.
This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. It goes back to the fig leaves.
Right. The question he starts with is, why did Adam and Eve cover up after sin entered the world? They were naked before that moment, and the Bible says they felt no shame. The traditional answer is always, well, they were ashamed before God. But John Paul II argues it was also because they were afraid of each other.
Afraid of each other. How so?
Before sin, they looked at each other and saw a whole person, a subject to be loved and known. They saw the soul through the body. After sin, lust entered the world. And lust, in this definition, is the desire to use another person as an object for your own gratification. The dynamic shifted from to love and cherish to desire and dominate.
That's a chilling phrase, to desire and dominate.
It is. And in that moment, they realized, you might look at me now and not see me. You might just see a body to be used for your pleasure, not a person to be known. So they covered up. JPI argues they covered the erotic goods, the parts that most easily provoke lust, in order to protect their personal values, their soul, their personality, their dignity.
So under this much deeper framework, modesty isn't about hiding the body because the body is bad or dirty.
No, the body is good. God made it and called it good. Modesty, in this view, is about revealing the person. It's like putting a frame around a beautiful work of art so that you focus on the subject of the painting. When you dress modestly, you are demanding to be seen as a whole subject, not reduced to an object.
That completely flips the script. It's no longer about protecting him from his thoughts. It's about protecting your own dignity and personhood.
Exactly. The source talks about the danger of self-objectification. Immodesty, then, is essentially a woman saying, I am an object for you to look at. I am reducing myself to my body parts for your enjoyment. Modesty fights against that. It says, I am a person you must interact with. Look at my eyes. Listen to my voice. It demands eye contact, not just body scanning.
That is a much healthier, more empowering place to operate from. It gives agency back to the individual. Okay, we've navigated the minefield of dating, we've respected our bodies and the bodies of others. Now we arrive at the destination so many people are aiming for. Marriage. But not just any marriage. The source we have from Biola University talks about the idea of a Christ-centered marriage.
And they make a really important distinction right off the bat. There is a difference between two Christians who are married and a true Christ-centered marriage.
That sounds like semantics. What's the practical difference?
You can have two Christians living in the same house who are essentially good roommates who pray before meals. They go to church, they believe the right things, but their day-to-day relationship dynamics are exactly the same as their secular neighbors. A Christ-centered marriage is one where Jesus is invited to be the Lord of the relationship dynamic itself. It involves creating what they call a third entity.
The relationship itself.
No, yes.
No.
It's not just you and me living separate lives, it's us. The relationship itself becomes a living, breathing thing that is designed to glorify God more than the two individuals could apart. It's a synergy.
So how do you build that? They offer some very practical habits. My favorite and the most convicting was something they call the 1 Corinthians 13 test.
Oh, this one is, I do this with couples in counseling, and it is always painful and illuminating.
Walk us through it.
You know the verse. It's read at every single wedding. Love is patient, love is kind. The test is you take that famous passage and you remove the word love and you insert your own name.
So, host is patient. Host is kind. Host does not envy, does not boast, is not proud.
And immediately your soul just goes, liar.
Laughs. Host was definitely not patient this morning in traffic. Host definitely keeps a record of wrongs, specifically about who was supposed to empty the dishwasher last.
It exposes the gap between the ideal and our reality so quickly. It's brutal. But the point isn't to shame yourself. The point is to use it as a diagnostic tool. It shows you the specific areas where you need to grow. It moves love from a vague feeling, I have butterflies, to a set of concrete, observable behaviors. Am I being patient right now? Am I being kind in this conversation?
Another huge point in this section was rethinking the word helper, as it applies to wives in the book of Genesis.
Yes, this gets right to the heart of the gender roles that often get tangled up in Christian marriage debates. In Genesis, Eve is created as a helper for Adam. In traditional, more patriarchal circles, this was interpreted to mean assistant, like Adam is the CEO and Eve is his administrative secretary.
Bring me my coffee, helper. Or, you exist to help me accomplish my mission.
Exactly. You are my subordinate. But the Hebrew word used there is izer. And if you actually look at how that specific word is used in the rest of the Old Testament, it completely blows that interpretation out of the water.
Give us the linguistic data.
Okay, so the word Ezer appears 21 times in the Old Testament. 16 of those times it refers to God. The Psalms are full of it. God is my Ezer. God is my helper.
And God is certainly not our assistant or our secretary.
Not even close. God is not subservient to us. The other times it's used, it's often in a military context. It means a warrior, a rescuer, a relief force that arrives to save the day when the battle is about to be lost.
So when God creates Eve as an Ezer for Adam, he is saying she supplies a vital strength that Adam lacked on his own. She's a co-warrior.
She is a warrior partner. She brings necessary rescue and strength to the partnership. That theology completely destroys the doormat wife idea, and it forces us to redefine headship for the husbands too.
It's not about being the boss.
It's about being a servant leader. If the husband is called to be the head of the wife, he is modeling himself after Christ, who is the head of the church. And what did Christ the head do? He washed feet. He gave up his rights. He laid down his life. He died. So biblical headship isn't about making all the decisions or being in charge. It's a race to the bottom. Who can outserve the other? Who can die to self faster?
It's mutually submissive in practice.
It is. It's a competition of generosity, not a hierarchy of power.
We have covered a staggering amount of ground today. From the horror stories of 1997 youth groups, through the clinical diagnosis of religious trauma, all the way to the linguistics of ancient Hebrew. As we synthesize all of this, Joshua Harris, the therapist, the theologians, what is the common thread? What's the big picture?
I think the shift is clear. We are moving from a paradigm of fear and rules to a paradigm of relationship and responsibility. Purity culture tried to guarantee a safe outcome through a strict set of rules. If you do X, Y, and Z, you will be safe and you will get a happy marriage. But life isn't safe.
And relationships are definitely not safe. To love someone is to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. The new paradigm we're seeing emerge acknowledges that love is risky, dating is risky, marriage is hard work. But instead of a rule book, it offers us the tools. Things like boundaries, honest community, the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and our own discernment to navigate that risk with wisdom.
It sounds like at its core, it's just growing up.
It is growing up. It's taking ownership of your own sexuality, your own singleness, and your own heart, rather than outsourcing that responsibility to a rule book or a pastor or a guru.
I want to leave the listeners with one final thought from the stack. It's something that touched me deeply when I was reading through the material. It's about the ultimate purpose of all this relationship angst.
This is the provocative thought to end on. We spend so much of our lives obsessing over our relationship status. Am I single? Am I dating? Is my marriage happy? Is it Christ-centered enough? We're constantly grading ourselves. But the Biola source, and honestly, the whole witness of Scripture, suggests that our relationship struggles are actually designed to do something else entirely.
And what is that?
They are designed to disappoint us.
That's a downer. That's not what I want to hear.
Bear with me. They are designed to disappoint us just enough to remind us that no human being can ever be God for us. If you are single and lonely, you feel that ache for a savior, for a completer. But if you get married, you will eventually find that even the best spouse on earth cannot fill the deepest God-shaped hole in your soul.
Only God can be God.
Exactly. The Bible tells us we are all broken people living on this side of heaven. So maybe the ultimate purpose of marriage isn't just to make us happy, but to teach us how to patiently and gracefully love another broken person. And maybe the purpose of singleness isn't a waiting room, but a training ground to teach us how to rely on God alone as our ultimate satisfaction.
It takes the pressure off. Your spouse doesn't have to be your savior. Your date doesn't have to be your Messiah. They just have to be your neighbor.
And we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves. Whether that neighbor is sleeping in the bed next to you or sitting across from you at a coffee shop on a first date or living in the apartment down the hall.
Well, that changes the way I look at the dinner table tonight. Thank you for guiding us through this. It's been a heavy, but I think a really hopeful deep dive.
It's been a real pleasure.
And to you listening, whether you're deleting a dating app or you're downloading one, or maybe you're having a hard conversation with your spouse tonight, we hope this gave you a better map than the one we had back in 1997. Let's unpack this. in your own life. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.